Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for the first of the month, December 1st. What a strong move to start the month. Sorry, I'm just getting situated here, shutting down a couple windows here on another screen. But yeah, there's a few things to kind of talk about in today's end of day market recap, and I think like pretty much, I mean, it's tough to find a negative for today. I thought that there was a lot of nice rotation, a little bit of rotation out of the strong names. I thought someone on CNBC, it might have been Michael Santoli, mentioned that, the Magnificent Seven, as they call them, have been kind of a little bit of a safety trade over the last year. I mean, they've had a huge year, but perhaps they're going to see a little bit of profit taking. That's something that I've been talking about too over the last week. I was talking about how I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see some rotation out of those big names and rotation into some of the other names. So I will go through some of that with you. I'll try to be as unbiased as possible with that. Before I do, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purpose only. Please read the full risk disclaimer there. Let me go over the raw numbers first too, because you could see with this type of with what I've got here in terms of the percentage change from open and the daily performance, the word awesome comes to mind. There's a lot of groups that were up over 2% for the day, a few groups that rallied over 3%. So, sometimes we see beginning of the month, like the first of the month, buying. Sometimes we don't. It's kind of been weird this year because I think a lot of these months have been a little bit weak in the beginning of the year, which is not how it normally works. Like traditionally, what I've seen, in my trading career is that new money is usually put to work in the beginning of the month, like the first of the month. But there's been a couple months this year where we've actually seen stronger price action towards the end of a month. But in any event, I found that interesting. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about so what I'm going to do in this video, because on Fridays I normally do a like end of week recap in terms of talking about performance for the week. Now I already did that in yesterday's video. I talked about the performance of the month. So what I want to do is, being that we have new value areas for the month of December, and I went over that in our live stream, the pre-market session, and I talked about where we could possibly open up and so on and so forth, and some positives and negatives. So I will do that again now that we've got a full day behind us, right, and closing candles, so that you can kind of see where these things kind of lined up and where they might line up for the month of December as well. But I want to talk about first. Yeah, so let's do that with the there's a lot to go over, so I'll go over the indices first, and then we'll drill down into sectors and some single names. But so SPY, right, we did end up, we opened up the month inside value, very close to the top of value, not too far to go. SPY finished up 60 basis points, and it did close above the value area, so you've got a nice easy level to watch. I always like nice easy setups, because such as this, because I could kind of tell where I'm going to be right or where I'm going to be wrong. For instance, we stay above this 458 spot 32 in SPY. Right? Really no choice but to be long, right? And to basically look for this next virgin point of control up here, right? So again, my charts I use volume at price, right, and something called the MarketWebs, which look at value areas per given period. If you're not familiar with that, just see my pinned tweet. I've got a whole document that explains volume at price, right, and how I use it. I don't use anchored VWAPs because anchored VWAPs are more subjective to me, right, meaning like you could draw the lines anywhere you want, kind of like a trend line, right? With the value areas, they're not subjective. They are what they are, right? They're roughly one standard deviation of the previous periods period activity, and there's no getting around the support or resistance. It is what it is. I can't anchor something back to a different time frame. I can't be biased at all. But really, I have no choice but to be long, provided that we're above 458.32, right? And that virgin point of control comes back from all the way from the highs of 2021, right? And that would be kind of the last overhead supply to be mindful of. Let's jump over to the Qs. right? What are the Qs telling us right now? Well, the Qs are a little bit of a different picture in the short term, all right? Because the Qs are up something like 44 or 45% year to date. They have certainly been the leader of the big indices, but they might be due for a little bit of a rest. And sometimes strong things like the Qs, they may not be resting for long. So I would just keep that in mind. There was a great chart earlier that was tweeted out by Helene Meisler. I'm not sure if I can find it from her feed, but I thought that this was like eligible for possibly the chart of the day. She had and I have this chart someplace too, but it's just easier for me to just reference it this way. Let's see if I can bring this over without closing anything. Let me move this. And then I need to move this. Sorry for the delay here, folks. But yeah, so here's Q versus QQEW. Notice the relationship of what's happening here. I'm going to come back to this, but it kind of means to me that that's some rotation out of, because remember what you're looking at here with the Qs versus QQEW and what these two ETFs are. Number one, they're the same components in both of these ETFs, QQQ versus QQEW. Same 100 components. However, one is market cap weighted and one, which is the QQQ, and one is equally weighted. So you've got the Qs in the numerator, the QQEW in the denominator. As this relationship goes down, it means that the rest of the components in the Qs are catching up, right? The equally weighted is actually doing better recently, over the last couple of weeks, and then the so-called Magnificent Seven, right? I'll come back to that in just a second, but I thought that that was a really interesting, considering what this has done here over the last week. There's been a rotation out of those names, and there's been rotation into some other areas of the market. And that's why we kind of look at some of those relationship charts, because they will tell you how one is performing versus the other. So there's the Qs. So inside value, again, the difference between inside value and outside of value is one is in price discovery if it's outside of value, versus one is for the time being is range bound, right? Based on all of last month's volume at price activity. Now the small caps, right? You've heard me, and this is sometimes how it works, right? You've heard me talk about, oh, I don't like the small cap chart. It hasn't really done anything, right? It hasn't done anything notable. I looked at the weekly chart, right? So you heard me say this the last couple of days, like, because I hear a lot of people who are getting more bullish about the small caps, and listen, that's our job, by the way, to be to doubt things, right? And to be investigative, right? And to basically not, really vet ideas, right? So, that's what I did. And by the way, I traded this today. So if you go to our trades channel, right, I did put on a starter position. Now I don't have a huge amount of conviction. So, I want to participate in something. Like if it's going to have momentum, I'm going to participate, right? And my job is to change my mind as quickly as when circumstances change. So if something's going to do this and act really well, and it did break through, it started inside value and it broke the value area. So the reason why it's just a starter, and the reason why I took a target too in this trade, is because I don't know what's going to happen. I've mentioned the thing that's concerning about IWM and some of the other sectors that have been underneath the 200-day moving averages. They're going to have to battle through overhead supply. So that's the issue there. So I have a trade on, I'm participating, but you have to be mindful that every time that we get to one of these red lines, it's a battle between sellers that are sitting and waiting there, or and it's a battleground between new buyers, and it's going to be like a tug of war. Who's going to win between the new buyers versus the sellers that are out there? And that's what the version point of controls tell us, is when there's overhead supply above. Below, it works the other way. It's demand down there. All right, so that's the major indices. And I also talk about the diamonds, because the diamonds have been absolutely on fire. Right, this is pretty cool to see this performance. Look at what this has done. right? I mean, the diamonds, and it's only 30 names in there, but things like Salesforce, things like UNH, right? Look at the performance for today, for example, for the diamonds, right? And again, this is not anything new. This has been going on now for a while. But you had Salesforce up another 3%. Nike was up nicely. Caterpillar got into the program. I took a trade in Caterpillar. I'll get to that in a minute. But you could see a lot of names there. Goldman Sachs up over 2%, right? Some of these names like a Walgreens, right, just haven't participated for a good portion of this year. So that's the major indices. Let's go through sectors really quickly, right? So what I did this for members earlier. Members, if you're watching this, you can kind of skip ahead in this video, but let's see, I should have this screen up someplace. That's not it. That's not it. What did I do with it? Here we go. All right. So what you have in front of you is all the sectors, and this is big groups, by the way, right? This isn't subgroups or subsectors. These are the main sectors and they're called GICS sectors that are in the spiders, right? In SPY. These are the sectors that make up the S&P 500. So I have this, I don't have it sorted, but I have it sorted by the weights. Let's go through these really quick. Let's see if I could do this within 2 or 3 minutes, all right? So let's start with XLK because XLK is the biggest. How much is this? It's 29% of the market, right? And tech has had a huge year, right? But notice what it's doing. Consolidate. We're in consolidation station for now. What's the level to watch for further breakout? That's 186.90. So that's what I'll be watching. Don't forget the two big components in XLK are Apple and Microsoft. The next biggest sector that we have on our hands, right, is believe it or not, is the financials, which actually surprised me. I didn't think the financials were that much, but they're 13%, right? And look at what they're doing, right? Starting the period above value. They're in price discovery. Even though they've already made this nice move in the month of November, they're not done going up yet, right? Maybe you see a pause there at 36.43. And ultimately, like, you don't have to own, of course, the sector ETF. It's just this is a proxy for the group. Next largest group is healthcare, XLB. Had a decent day. Well, up 40 basis points. The healthcare just doesn't move as fast. I still think that this is very sideways, but again, starting the month above the value area. Next group. I told you I was going to try to go fast. Consumer discretionary and then consumer services, right? So remember, consumer discretionary, a good almost half of this ETF, because it's market cap weighted, is Amazon and Tesla, right? That had a nice day today, up 1.4%. Although I don't think Amazon and Tesla were really driving that today. If you look at the movers today, let's see what was the best performer. Ulta was up 10.8%. Etsy, right? So those, Airbnb was up close to 7% for the day, and a bunch of other consumer discretionary names. Look at Tesla down 0.5%, and Amazon also one of the underperformers, right? Just again, interesting that we're seeing this theme all over the place, right? Rotation out of the big ones and redeployment in some of the smaller names in the ETF. Still, the smaller names carry the ETF with Ulta helping there, but still inside the value area for the new month. XLC, same thing, right? This ETF is dominated by Meta and by Google. They make up about 45% of this ETF, and that's locked inside the value area, right? So not yet. And again, by the way, going through this, like, just so that there's no confusion, we're looking at kind of the shorter term, right? Long term, the trends are intact for these things, right? But what I'm talking about is just this month, right? And what we're kind of seeing so far as we start the month, right? But I'm not looking at weekly charts here. I'm not looking at the longer term. I'm not saying anything bad about these companies. It's just for now they're taking a little bit of a break. Next on the list, let's go back to this. That's XLC, by the way. So industrials, consumer staples, and energy, right? This is where I was kind of focused for the day. I like, in particular, when we start to see things like the industrials and the materials get going. Really strong move today for for what the industrials normally do. You could see up on your screen, there's not that many candles that are that big for an industrial move. So really impressive, right? URI broke out today, right? That's new all-time highs for URI. I mentioned Caterpillar. Caterpillar hasn't really done much. Nice break of the same thing, nice break of the value area, and took a position in this today. I did get, yesterday I got long GE. I also got long some AER, right? AmeriCap, which is a name that was on our watch list to start the week. If I don't forget, I'll bring up how the watch list did for this week. So I think a lot of possibilities, and pretty good to see. Next, I was going to jump to the materials, right? Because I always kind of group the materials and the industrials. They have some crossover, like Deere, for instance, is in the XLB, but I kind of view that as an industrial. But this has also been a really nice move. Also, your metals and mining, right, which has been up consecutively. Now that did take out a virgin point of control today, but that is, that's a huge move for the metals and miners today, up 2.7%. Also another group too, that's kind of a subgroup, which I wanted to look at too, which is the ITB. The home builders had a monster break out of this consolidation that has been going on for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, so more than 2 weeks. And I think this was the CPI, right, when this jumped up here. So it's been consolidating for more than 2 weeks, right, and resolved higher. Very impressive to see that out of the home builders. That's very close to breaking to new, I believe that's new all-time highs for the home builders, if it can break past 89.69. If I had to guess, I think the home builders might see new highs next week. What else? I mentioned some of the other ones, right? Consumer staples, even though they're not really kind of the most sought after group right now, they are also starting above the value area. Utilities also starting above the value area for the year. REITs, right? This is not real estate, by the way. This is REITs had a big day as well. So again, some of these are kind of unloved areas of the market, but they are pushing up quite nicely. What did I covered materials. The only one I didn't cover was energy, which I think is kind of interesting because there are some energy names that are acting really well. This also did not make it out of its value area for the new month. But when you look at things like like the coal names, which we don't have an ETF for anymore, but AMR, CEIX had a big move today too. That's also just like that out to new highs. All right, so that's what I wanted to go through in terms of going through sectors and noticing where what sectors objectively are starting the month above its value area versus inside. I mentioned the second thing, so that's rotation that we kind of covered, because I think a lot of that going on is rotation. And I mentioned out of Magnificent Seven. Here's our watch list for that. So again, if you go back to this for just a second, right? How many huge, like dark green areas, which anything above like 2.5% is coded dark green, depending on which column it's in, right? And then if you were just to look at the Magnificent Seven, you would probably say, wow, the market didn't have such a good day if that's the only thing that you're concentrated on, right? Out of this, and I have 8 on here, not 7, but 6 out of the 8 were down today, right? Considering how strong the market was and how strong the breadth was, you had 6 out of the 8 magnificent or whatever grade 8 names were actually down today, and Apple and Amazon, which were up, were not up that much. Again, these things are always very interesting to me, these relationships, and the more what we try to do, of course, at Tribeca Trade Group, is try to identify when this is going on, so that we could be in the areas that are showing the momentum. We could be in the areas that are showing basically the alpha, right? A lot of short squeeze names. I can list probably 50 of these things, but a lot of these names are going up. Lyft, is like the secondary name to Uber, has been a big underperformer, but this was up 12% for the day, right? A lot of names like that were up. Like Airbnb is a name that really hasn't done too much. This had a big day today, right? But yeah, you could go through, a lot of the solar names, for example, did pretty well. They're starting to kind of see some money, being put to work, I think, at these levels, as well as squeezing a bit. And then finally, what's been, I would say, I didn't cover software and going through sectors. That's not software, right? Truly amazing, right? I think for software. Notice you've got one VPOC up there. If there's a VPOC up there, that means we're not at 52-week highs. I mean, it's crazy that this isn't even as close to new highs as some of the other groups are. But, every day we're seeing a couple of these little software names break higher. This was Elastic, which was really interesting to me because I tried to trade this about a month ago and it just didn't have the momentum. And then it spent the better part of November really not doing anything. And it was, I guess, just waiting for earnings to come out. But there really wasn't much interest in this name, right? For example, right? So this belongs to the software cyber group. Look at what the software and cyber group did in November. Whoop, right? So if you were an ESTC, you were not happy, right? Considering like if you held for the last month, but you got rewarded today. Right. And then, of course, Ulta was another name that was up decently, right up to that virgin point of control. And then IoT also just, which is really interesting. This name has been difficult because it's had these starts and stops and starts and stops. Maybe this time it will kind of, because, the last time it reported earnings, it had one big green bar, went up a little bit further, and then really just gave it all back in a matter of a couple of weeks. I think this might be different, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I think definitely one to watch for next week. I mentioned our watch list. How did it do this week? Pretty awesome, right? And I mixed in, I mix in things other than just software names or high growth names. I do mix in things like home construction, right? And some metals named, like Cleveland Cliffs was a nice trade for me today. That was a name that I added. Nucor and STLD had a huge day yesterday, and I believe some continuation today. But I'm more than happy to get involved in other things besides just software names. Even though those spoken for themselves have done extremely well. So I'll leave it there. Again, we put together this watch list. I put it together every weekend. And it's been an amazing run, the last over the last month or so. So I will continue to do that. I'll put together another list. You can see the names in gray are the names that I keep on from the previous week, right? And then I kind of add over the weekend, and just amazing. This firm was up about 30% from the trigger. STNE was up also in the double digits from the trigger as well, but a lot of outperformance there. Guys, have a great weekend, and I'll see you back on Monday.